Hello, dear friends. I'm not sure I'm 100% up to doing a full length movie review tonight, but I feel compelled because I'm really excited about something I watched the other night. I had to work all day today. I had to do a lot of errands yesterday in order to combat my financial difficulties that seem never ending. Anyway, I'm home now. I have to work again in the morning. I'm actually working 2 days a week, amazingly, at this job that I'm on my way out of, hopefully. Missing all digits and toes and everything. I'll give you guys an update on that very soon. As soon as I hear if, when I start the new job, I'm apparently finally going to start. It's like I don't believe anything until I see it anymore because I had the rug pulled out from under me so many times the last few months. But on a lighter note, uh, I spied another film on Shudder, thanks to the kindness of channel patron Shelly Druckrey. I was able to see another film that I resonated with, and I think it's my favorite of the three that I feel that way about. The prior two I have reviewed. One was Bliss by Joe Begos and Blood Quantum by Jeff Barnaby, both from 2019. I did lengthy, perhaps too lengthy, video reviews of both of those. Very recent episodes. Please check them out. People seem curious about Bliss, but the Blood Quantum review is just kind of sitting there with no love. So check it out. Give it a like. Give this one a like. I really need it. I got to combat that algorithm curse of YouTube. The more views I get, the more views I get. The more likes I get, the more views I get. You have to rise to the top somehow, like hook or by crook. So this one I might do a little cheat thing on along the side because I don't have every name detail memorized, but the vibe of this thing was powerful. But I'm going to try to get the facts straight too. There's not a huge amount of background to talk about this movie, at least as far as the filmmakers or the making of the movie, at least not available to me at this time. Of course, I could do a lot more research online, but I'm giving you my usual kind of hot take. Had a couple of days to think about it, so let's get to it. It's called The Spine of Night, 2021 film. It played at the South by Southwest Film Festival last year. I believe it won an award or two. I may need to double check that. It is co-directed by two gentlemen named Philip Gelatt and Morgan Galen King. The two of them also wrote it. Yes, the film was first screened at the Beyond Fest, October 2nd, 2021, at the Sitges Film Festival. No, I'm sorry. These are not the same thing. The Beyond Fest, October 2nd, 2021. Then on October 8th at Sitges Film Festival, which is, one of Europe's preeminent horror and fantasy film festivals. It has been for many years. And then it was screened at the Fantasy Film Fest on October 17th. It says it was released digitally and theatrically on October 29th, 2021. It did not reach our esteemed city theatrically that I'm aware of, but it did streaming exclusively on Shudder, and that is how I came to see it. I had heard of it on YouTube. I forgot how. Somehow, I think the trailer was recommended to me. I thought the thumbnail and the title were really cool. And yeah, so basically, it's an American film. I don't really know much about this co-director Morgan Galen King. The other guy, Philip Gelatt, he apparently works on the TV series, animated TV series on Netflix, Love, Death, and Robots, which I've never seen. I have heard of. Uh, he adapted a movie from a Laird Barron story, um, but he wrote the movie Europa Report, which I saw and I did like that one. And he's also dabbled in some video games and a couple other things. So um, basically, these two guys wanted to make an animated film, and they chose to do it as what is now called 2D animation, I guess, as opposed to 3D animation, CGI, kind you see in most animated films nowadays, and of course, ultra popularized by the likes of Pixar and Disney, and then Pixar bought by Disney, so on. And quite frankly, most of those films and the look of them I don't care for. Not because it's 3D animation, the the look of the designs of the characters and such. I'm just not the target audience. However, I'm squarely the target audience for this film, and again, not because it's 2D, but because the 2D animation, which is done using rotoscoping, which you trace the figures, the live action figures, performing scenes, sketching out scenes. You draw on top of them in whatever style, and then you paint the backgrounds, etc. And there's some digital effects with some of the, at least digital sweetening with some of the energy and kind of cosmic outer space effects. It is very squarely a. It is. It would be an understatement to say it was inspired by Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi is one of my favorite filmmakers. He kind of pioneered the adult animation subgenre, if you call it that, with Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, Coonskin, Lord of the Rings, Fire and Ice, Hey Good Looking, Cool World, and I'm probably forgetting one or two. But anyway, Heavy Traffic is among my favorite films. I love Coonskin. I love Fritz the Cat. I like his Lord of the Rings. I personally prefer it to the Peter Jackson films. I'm not as one of those weird, controversial opinions. Sorry about that. Fire and Ice, given its pedigree, should have been really good. I used to kind of like it. It took me years to finally see it. Well, I saw part of it at a comic book convention in the 80s, which was fitting because it was written by comic book writers Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway, who I grew up reading their stuff at Marvel. In more recent years, I revisited Fire and Ice. I don't know. I was disappointed with it. Oh, and here I've forgotten probably my second favorite film of his. Next to Heavy Traffic would be Wizards. And Wizards also employed a great comic book talent from that period, Mike Plug, who had done incredible art in the 70s on Marvel's Monster line. Plug had drawn and co-created the Ghost Rider. He had drawn Man Thing, Werewolf by Night, Frankenstein Monster. He'd done covers and fill-ins on all kinds of other books. A very idiosyncratic artist. His art at that time looked quite a lot like Will Eisner's. He was I guess, apprentice or however you would put it, in Eisner's studio. But he did a lot of drawings that were used in Wizards, like paintings and pencil drawings that were used along with narration by Susan, I think it's Susan Tyrrell, is her name. and those are cool boys. And Wizards is kind of a post-apocalyptic, way post-apocalyptic, millions of years, or at least hundreds of thousands, I don't know, where people are rediscovering people or what is left. Humans, mutants, other kinds are rediscovering both magic and technology, and so it's a science fiction uh, sword and sorcery hybrid. It has just a great flavor to it. It's very, it's a unique kind of vision. I really enjoy it a lot. Um, so I would have to say that Wizards and Fire and Ice definitely influenced this movie extremely heavily. Some of the drawings are. Oh, another great Ralph Bakshi movie I totally forgot. I'm sorry, American Pop from 1980. Just watched it last week. Uh, American Pop, yes, that's another great one. Another one with a lot of rotoscoping. He started using that technique, I guess, with Wizards, and then kind of expanded on it with uh, Lord of the Rings and American Pop, and then Fire and Ice was supposed to be his big sword and sorcery opus. So he enlisted, people who had written some strong sword and sorcery comic books to do it, and I don't know. I just don't think it came together. But again, this is just what do I know? Um, but Spine of Night is superior to Fire and Ice. It's in its ways is superior to most of Bakshi's films. I don't want to say. I mean, it's not as groundbreaking. It's obviously uses Bakshi's template to a T. It's a worthy successor, a descendant. So basically, it's about this flower, this kind of mystically imbued plant called the bloom that's blue, and just basically resides within this incredible energy, and it can heal, it can destroy, uh, it can do just about anything depending on the wielder's intent and uh, what kind of ritual they perform to bring the powers out. It can turn to flame, a blue flame that can illuminate or destroy. Um, and the main character is named Tzod, Tzod, and she's a woman voiced by Lucy Lawless, who does an amazing voice performance. This movie is very literate. The dialogue and narration and flashback, which is provided mostly by the character Tzod, extremely well written, minimalist in some ways, not flowery or florid, just right. Tight writing, but very dramatic, very intellectual, um, very way out, I guess, transcendent and cosmic in a lot of ways, very mystical, magical. Um, it kind of I feels authentic. Tzad is a character very much like some of Bakshi's characters in that this is a NC-17 rated movie for the theaters apparently. Um, and with good reason. The main character is mostly nude, um, and when I say that, I mean uh, she's a voluptuous woman. Not really curvy, um, but large bosomed, and they're bare, and her pubic hair is visible. She has bare legs, bare arms. She has jewelry and bracelets and such, and a animal skull headdress, and then some other jewelry and things. And then she's got kind of in front of dangling from her around her neck and her shoulders like a shawl is a large patch of this bloom, and it covers her breasts for a time, but then uh, she begins to lose pieces of it over periods of time. The movie kind of spans, from what I can tell, I would have to say, possibly centuries. It's hard to tell exactly. Um, Most of it is told by her as a story to a dying character called the Guardian, voiced by Richard E. Grant. He's top billed in this. Great voice, of course. From With Nail and I and Logan, and recently was in Loki. Um, the Guardian has this really incredible stylized gold armor. His mask is very reminiscent of the weird takeoff on ancient Roman sculptures masks that were worn originally. Well, they were kind of the template for the design for the character Zardoz in the film Zardoz, and then they were simplified and stylized into these plastic transparent masks. Uh, well, there were transparent masks worn by some of the characters, but there was a Zardoz itself, white mask worn by Terry Hawkins, the main character in Last House on Dead End Street, by Roger Watkins, really notorious, of course, underground extreme horror film where snuff is the main theme. Um, and yeah, I like it a lot. It hasn't come out on Blu-ray yet, but yeah, it's that kind of design. But it's very it's very minimalist. The inking, drawing outlines are very minimalist over the figures, but the figures, of course, move so naturalistically, being they are rotoscoped. Um, so there's different levels of detail, but nothing is extremely detailed. Most of it's very simple, great designs, but very simple, very minimalist, and a combination of looks because it's kind of like a indeterminate world at an indeterminate time and in that indeterminate world's history. But definitely that kind of sword and sorcery milieu, like the Hyborian Age and Conan or Middle Earth. There aren't any elves or dwarves or orcs, or dragons, um, but there is magic in the earth, and Sod is like the high priestess of this group of swamp people. They call her a swamp witch. I think not in a nice way either. Um, and Halstal, I think, is the name of what she calls her swamp kingdom, and she chants that word quite a lot. The accent that Lucy Lawless chooses for this performance is just incredible. She just enunciates every word so perfectly and with nuance, but not overly so, not pretentiously so. There's emotion and there's wisdom in her character. There's a kind of a there's a sagacious aspect to her character that's um, pretty amazing. She's an indomitable kind of female character, kind of like an Earth Mother kind of character. And the bloom is basically something that she loves, that has nourished her and her children, her family, her tribe, or whatever in the swamps. Um, but then other people decide, from a big evil kind of feudal era looking kingdom called Pyre, ruled by this idiot named Paranton, uh, that he's going to take this bloom and take its power, and he's going to destroy the swamp creatures, capture and chain Sod, and he achieves all of this. He's a dandy. He's very affected in the way he speaks. He's voiced by Patton Oswalt, who I personally, am not fond of either his work or his personal views and antics. But he's a popular voice artist. He's a popular comedic artist. Obviously he's portraying Pip the Troll with the aid of CGI in the cameo of the Eternals film. That was the Jim Starlin character from Marvel from the 70s. He finally debuted. Patton Oswalt, I guess that was kind of inspired casting. Uh, Basically, he's just kind of a guy who I find to be kind of an ass, and I mean, a lot of people love him. But that's fitting for this character. Brandon is really kind of a piece of shit. He's like the spoiled dandy who rules this kingdom. He's extremely sadistic. His father rules a wider kingdom. It's almost like Rome. It's like Paranton is like a little satellite kingdom that the daddy gives. I mean, Pyre, Pyr, is like a satellite kingdom that daddy gives to Paranton, Pyrantin, to do as he pleases, and he's tricked very quickly by um, Zod, who uses the bloom uh, to uh, take hold of some flame that he's near, and it turns blue and it expands and it burns his face. Pretty much kind of the way half of Harvey Dent's face looked in the Dark Knight movie by Christopher Nolan. Where it's down to like the muscles and you see everything, the nerves. There's no skin whatsoever, and parts of the bones. Uh, a fitting fate, almost fitting, because then he turns around and firebombs her entire swamp and kills all of her people. So he says, "You took my face. I took your people. Damn swamp." He doesn't say your damn swamp, but he does curse the swamp. So into this comes a guy named GALORE, voiced by someone, Jordan Douglas Smith, I was not familiar with. So GALORE is this bald guy with a goatee, a very sharp goatee. He has that kind of Anton LaVey look. He has like long burgundy robes. He's very stylish. He looks like he comes from a culture slightly more advanced than the feudal culture of Pyre. And he does. He comes from this culture called the Pantheon. And the Pantheon basically is, I guess, the oldest repository of the oldest parts of the world. Like, in other words, there's the parts that are still being conquered, like Pyre. And then there's the parts that are unconquered, uncivilized, like the swamp. But this is kind of a broader thing, and it's basically ruled ostensibly by scholars, capital S, intellectuals who are preserving these thousands or millions of books. And it's kind of like a gigantic library kind of uh, placed into this large stone edifice that's carved, like a giant castle. It's pretty impressive when you actually see it. Um, it's painted, it's not drawn. It's more three-dimensional looking. Uh, so you assume that this guy GALORE has got to be a decent guy. He pleads for Brandon to not kill Zod and to calm down, basically, and he wants to find out, gain knowledge from the bloom, and bring him back to the Pantheon. Paranton just wants Paranton of Pyre just wants power. Sorry. And so a little clash ensues where the scholar helps free Zod, but she sinks Paranton to his death in the swamp. And it looks like he's going to take her back to the Pantheon with the bloom, where he has a friend who's one of the major scholars there. She's a character named Faye Agura, Phae-Agura, an African American looking woman, striking, also very, very, very interestingly dressed. Nice colors, mostly like purple and lavender. More modern-ish clothing, not like 20th century, but not Middle Ages either. Like they wear pants, and she and you know Galsur are friends and fellow scholars, and they work for this guy who's kind of the I guess he's kind of like the head scholar. It's this old creepy guy, and basically, uh, Feogora, her motives are, you know, we're not going to let people like Brent plunder the Pantheon. So a plethora of P's in this. Um, but a surprise comes during a battle where Galsur turns out not to be what he appears to be. And he actually turns on and tries to kill Sod, and he takes the bloom. And he's kind of power hungry. And you know, it seems like he's pleading his case, though, from a point of view that Feogora and some of the other scholars might sympathize with, in that you know he's going to absorb all of the knowledge and all these books into himself. But you know, basically, he wants to become a god, and of course, his megalomania becomes too much for her, and she eventually dies fighting his forces. He takes over everything, takes over the Pantheon, he takes over, you know, the Pyre and those kind of places over a period of years. It makes him immortal, apparently. And he, in the course of this, he goes to, well, first off, I want to make sure I got this. I want to make sure I got this in the right order. I did forget a key thing. He does betray Zod, but he is captured and he's chained for a number of years. But he still has the power of the bloom within him. His eyes are blue. And the elder guy, who's kind of custodian of the Pantheon, confronts him, and then Galsur's power explodes, and it looks as though his body dies, and he possesses the body, takes it over of the elder guy. So that's when the elder guy comes forward, but it's really Galsur in his mind, and he announces, you know, officially, I'm taking over, absorbing all this knowledge, I'm becoming a god, and gets rid of Feogora and any opposition, and kills, kills Sod. She sinks down into the swamp. Now she's telling this story in flashback to the Guardian, and he's like, "So you have just now told me of the story of your death, and yet here you stand before me." And of course, she, you know, replies with some fitting aphorism, philosophical kind of rebuttal. Very, very well written movie. And so from then on, it's basically just the years go by, and this asshole, Galsur, grows more and more powerful and maniacal, unlikable, sickening, disgusting, and irredeemable, and unstoppable. However, you know, the Guardian he is the Guardian in this kind of mountain where he's one of a series of Guardians over centuries, and they all kind of wear that different gold and black armor, albeit slightly different designs than his and from each other. But he's kind of guarding the last of the bloom, you know, the last of the magic plant, and Galsur wants all of it. You know, he's eventually going to, you know, confront the Guardian. He's going to take over everything. Things don't exactly go as he plans, though. The Guardian expires, but Zod is kind of revitalized and goes against Galsur. Over the intervening years, there's been some like renegades and rebels, vigilantes that have formed to stop Galsur. And for most of these is this trio of characters who fly on these artificial wings and have these kind of beak masks that are like beaks. And so they have bird motifs, like skeletal bird motifs. There's a male, his name's Falconhawk, and there's two females, one named Sparrow Crow, and one named Kestrel Wren. So they're all named double birds. They're interesting characters. They're just pretty much unstoppable fighters and athletes and martial artists and flyers and strategists, and they figure out a way to get to the apex of this ship where there is a kind of crystal globe that's embodying part of the power of the bloom. Galsor is losing a lot of his dominance, and he's kind of freaking him out. So they manage to, just through sheer ingenuity and skill, take him down for a time, crash his ship, and but they each lose their life, one after the other, sacrificing it to do this. And as one of the two women, winged women, is steering the ship to where it explodes into this castle with the globe she's using it to navigate it, but it's been attacked and they're all falling, and she gets in a battle straight up with Galsor, and of course he's far too powerful for her, and so he's basically torturing her. He uses his magic to break every single bone in her body. She's still alive, and she says, "Tell me, do gods also suffer?" And the blue globe hits him and explodes. The whole ship explodes. The castle explodes. So, but this guy, you can't get rid of this guy too easily. But Sod confronts him, and his men shoot her with crossbows. We find out how she came back to life. How she came back to life was when he first went into this powerful form he was in and stayed in for decades or centuries. At some point, this blue energy remains of the balloon flow into the water because of something he did. I forgot what. And all the way into the swamp, and reanimated her and brought her completely back from the dead. So that's an idea of how powerful it is, and also the bond between her and this plant. So yeah, it's him and her, and she's shot and she's mortally wounded. I mean, she's still human. Her body, she can wield this magic, but she has no other physical real power. And she's not even. I mean, she can fight, but she's not skilled like the three winged warriors were. I'm really alliterative today, and so she makes something happen as she's dying, though it takes her a while to die, thankfully. She reaches out with the last bit of the bloom she has, and she awakens all of the dead guardians that are because now they're up there in the mountain. I mean, this guy's going to take over everything. Even as he's kind of losing power, he's going kind of nuts and trying to gain more and more of it. Now that he's gotten his enemies pretty much all out of the way. So the Guardian that we met, voiced by Richard Grant, has indeed passed away, and his was the final vigil, and they do call it a vigil. And so this magic does not affect his body. However, it reanimates all of the previous Guardians from the centuries down. So they're in various states of decomposition and skeletally. They still have the black and gold armor. Some of it's falling off. One guy's headless, just a neck bone sticking out in the armor, but he's still fighting. You can't hurt them. They're dead. You can't, stop them by cutting off any limb, even their head. They're going to keep going. So that's how powerful the Bloom's magic is, and how the Guardians respond to it, because the way I see it, they don't always say this in the story. I'm wildly speculating, but they've been in that mountain all that time. I kind of feel like the power of the bloom kind of infused them to an extent, and she basically triggered it and enabled them to come back as undead. Because after all, I mean, it brought her back to full life from a skeleton. So uh, the Guardians, the undead Guardians, fuck up all of GALORE's men, and they finally corral him. Uh, and he is cut. There's a lot of gore in this, very graphic. I mean, very simply drawn. So it's not going to really like the actual details of the guts aren't going to gross you out like if you were watching a Tom Savini, 3-dimensional effect. But it's just not realistic per se. But it is well, it's rotoscope, so it is based on real movements. But then they slit people open. They slit one guy's head in 3 parts. Lots of decapitations and dismemberments, disembowelments, and it gets more so as the movie goes on because more and more people trying to oppose GALORE, and he's just a murder machine. And so they actually managed to, as he's losing the power, his eyes are glowing blue and he's reaching out for the ambient power that's left. And they actually slice him all the way in half. And yet he is still alive, even though his whole half here, everything is still alive. Because I thought surely that would be a way to stop him if they totally destroy his physical body, like kill the brain, kill the heart. But he's still alive, and one side of his face is still screaming and gloating at these people until he's finally utterly decimated into nothingness. Well, decimated would be reduced to 10%, literally, but he's reduced to like 0%. So annihilated, how about that? So I was happy. That made me feel good. He was a repugnant character. Good villain because, I mean, at first you're just like, how can he seem so cool and then betray her? And then just the things he keeps doing to everybody, he turns out to be worse than Paranton, who was a sadistic, perverted tyrant, So all of the kind of tropes you see in these kind of fantasy stories where you have a being like that, a guy reaches for some magic object or thing or, whatever, in this case, the flower, and that's their obsession, or a ring, for instance, and they become more and more power drunk, power mad. And, the dialogue in those old school stories, are very melodramatic, they're very literate, very well, constructed. They're not talking in slang. This isn't like a Joss Whedon kind of thing where they're, talking in the modern lingo. And I'm not knocking fantasy shows that do that. I mean, or comics or whatever. I do think it's become a little too prevalent as an overreaction to how ponderous and melodramatic some of the old writing became. A good example for me is, what to me the first time I saw a show in this milieu that had that kind of wit and verbiage was Hercules and Xena, those shows, ironically. And then Lucy Lawless is in this, but she's not talking like Xena at all, and then it kind of permeated as other people like Whedon came along. I know he did more science fiction than heroic fantasy, but I'm just saying it's de rigueur now. But and it bled into comic books, and it's almost become so much so in Marvel comics that it's a ridiculous. It's become as ridiculous as the over ponderousness of the old, this kind of old English inflected, grandiose dialogue. This movie strikes a balance, and that's what I think is brilliant about it in the writing, is that it's serious. It's not silly. It's not a joke. It's very, it's pretty grim, and it's pretty, but it's also philosophical. Another movie that obviously influences is Heavy Metal. It's much better animated than Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal was an ambitious movie that in some ways failed, but it's still a good piece of entertainment to me. It's dated worse than the Bakshi stuff. It's not as well crafted as say Fire and Ice or Wizards, but the main centerpiece and final story in the anthology of the movie called Tarna is a great template for this kind of story. It does use more rotoscoped animation. It's very gory. The heroine is naked part of the time. Um, it's very dark and grim and it's terse. Uh, you know, yeah, Tarna is a masterpiece to me, but placed within a movie that is, you know, uneven, you know, but nice for what it is. You know, not nearly as great as the writing and art in the original stories that were published in the magazine Heavy Metal, which was originally known in France as Metal Hurlant, screaming metal, and heavy metal was the, you know, in the air in the 70s, you know, is the term for music. The first time it was applied to music was by Blue Oyster Cult's manager, Sandy Pearlman. He got it from William S. Burroughs, who first started using heavy metal as like a description of a crazy description of things. He had a character like the Heavy Metal Kid. So, like a lot of things, like Blade Runner, that's another phrase that William Burroughs came up with. He's coined a lot of them. You know, he's kind of like a beatnik Shakespeare, but um, so it had a lot of elements of those movies, some of the best elements of those movies, and I liked the strong female characters. I liked the way the villain was just, just you know, he used that grand dialogue and pretty much would is telling you, I want I to be a god. I am taking over the universe. But it's not cheesy. It's well written. Uh, it's like poetry. So anyway, I highly recommend this movie. For God's sake, watch The Spine of Night. God's Gods apostrophe. Um, and get back to me and let me know what you think about it. I just wanted to talk about it, even though obviously I fudged a couple of the plot points in my head, and I wasn't 100% sure of all the names. But you know, fortunately, they're, you know, I each by, and I'm not going over long. So thanks for listening. Please leave a like. I don't know how I'm going to do these on the screen. I've reversed because this is reversed. This is like a mirror of how it ends up, you know, when you guys watch it. So I've reversed the icons so that they'll match what I'm doing. So here's going to be subscribe, the little thing of me. So hit that and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Here's going to be the last episode and the next episode of Blue Review. So thank you. I'll be back soon with a whole bunch of other stuff. I started watching that Murder in the Blue World Blu-ray, and I had the honor of being tagged by the authoress of its inside booklet, Kimberly Lindbergh's, on Facebook last night. She recommended a video I made last evening. That's the one right prior to this episode is the one on Murder in the Blue World unboxing video. I'll do a review one soon. So check it out and take care.